Um, as I hit record, I am reminded of the promise that I made to put our recording last week online, which I did not do, but I still have it recorded somewhere. So perhaps I will do better with my intentions than I have so far. So hey, welcome everyone. It's August 1st. It's August. Sheesh. We're on chapter something. I don't know what number chapter we're on. I don't think he keeps numbers of it. 10. Okay. Mari says chapter 10, sex part 2, higher love of Recapture the Rapture. I really like how long we're taking with this.
Leisurely love making.
That's right. We're letting Jamie have his way with us.
Well, I don't know if I like that analogy.
That's where I was going with it.
Homie, don't play that.
All right. So what let's have some fun with this. What would those of us who've sort of been around Jamie and his work for a while, what do you think would be an appropriate safe word for Jamie Wheel that he would want us to use?
It would have like 7 syllables. I don't know what it would be though.
Something scientific or maybe from a different language, different culture.
I think what was that, hierogamy, or I think that will be a safe word. It's something like, isn't it hierogamy? Isn't that the word he uses?
Hierogamy, yeah. I'm not sure. Yeah. Maybe on the pronunciation.
Yeah, I'm a Brit, so I pronounce it.
How about coprophilia?
That just sounds dirty.
It is very dirty. There's people who like having sex after they've been shit upon.
Oh, wow. Now I have an image.
Well, I thought that there was multiple syllables. It's a fancy Greek word.
Wow. Okay. I don't know if anyone's going to top that.
It's a paraphilia. Look it up on Wikipedia. Paraphilias.
That's
really interesting.
No, not really.
Okay, I'm done.
No interest here.
Well, and the tricky thing with the safe word, right, is that it needs to be something that won't naturally come up, in a conversation.
Yeah, that word qualified. That one I said.
Yeah. Say it again. Copra.
Copra. That's Greek for poo, feces, and philia means you have an inordinate affection for. Like pedophilia. That's all that meant. Someone really likes children a lot. Of course, it came to me. Now we know why they like children a lot. But
okay, all right. So I'm going to get vulnerable here, and say that I'm getting a little bit of like the hair standing up in the back of my neck kind of thing. So I did a breathwork session this morning, right? And I decided to do no music. So I'll let my mind go where it's going to go. And a place where my mind went was the most recent episode of The Leftovers, which my wife and I are rewatching, where there's a character who has that fetish. And my mind went there in my breathwork session, and I tried to visualize this gentleman taking a shit on my chest.
That's it.
That happened in my brain, in this brain, less than an hour ago, and I had no idea that Tom was going to bring the official Greek.
That would be somebody who actually likes that and gets off on that and gets sexually aroused.
Yeah. And to be completely clear, it was not a sexual thing. It was just I was laying on my back and we had just watched that sort of episode. Yeah. So
that would just be copra. No philia involved.
That's right. So when we have these fun little synchronicities, usually they don't involve being shit on. But hey, maybe that's how I'm going to trust it, at least. The spirit moves in interesting ways. All right. Well, we're not going to have anyone else probably joining us. I think we've got the group that we're going to have. We have got a total of 8 people here, including me. So I would like to join the our small group session, which sometimes I do and sometimes I don't, but today I get to. And I know that Tom had indicated in previous week that this chapter was of particular interest or importance, or like a lot of things were coming up, and that there were several things that you wanted us to maybe discuss on. So without having talked to you, I wanted to sort of see if it made sense to sort of kick it to you, alley-oop it to you, to give us something to talk about in our breakout session. So with the coprophilia conversation now
That
commenced.
is not higher love. That's not what I meant.
Well, what would you, if you could send us into, about a 15-minute breakout session with 2 groups of 4, what would you encourage us to start with as a question as we inquire about higher love?
Well, here I have a Kindle, so I don't know what page it would be on in a literal book. But it's a section in this chapter where Jamie brings up my favorite sex psychologist, really, is Jenny Wade. I read the book Transcendent Sex, When Love Making Opens the Veil. And she had more of because I did a sexual Taoist, an extension of my martial arts, sexual yoga with my wife and with my partner of 8 years, and died. And I read that book during that time. It was going beyond that. And that happened. I was 56 when my partner died, and dated a little bit. It's like, no, I got to go beyond that. But that's me in my late midlife, and now I'm in my 60s, pushing 70. So going in that direction, where in this chapter, Jamie talks about a tantric yoga, a la Vajrayana, Tibetan, and using that to get to a transcendent place. So that was my practice, and going a little further beyond the need to pair up and have a relationship with a woman that's sexual. Because I've been doing advanced tantric practice, which actually requires celibacy, no coitation, going beyond. So this is a place I have done. There's no dakini to practice with. Overtly, that's what I do in my dance world. I call it Bluetooth love. I no longer need to plug in, just get in proximity, do it through dance. It starts with an erotic base, but that hermetic marriage of the queen and the king. It's a symbolic, turning the lead of sexual lust, erotic love, like child, I want what I want, into bronze, silver to gold. It's an alchemical process, but I don't know how to form that into a question. I just wanted to initiate that conversation. And he touches on it lightly here toward the end of the chapter. And I'm just focusing on that part where he's talking about existential equanimity. And then in the next paragraph, he quotes Jenny Wade, who was intricately involved in the integral movement. And there was a little falling out with the whole spirodynamics thing. So she was an intricately oriented person. Ken Wilber talked about her a lot. But Jenny Wade, because that was her take on it. She's around my age, and that's where she was. She, amongst her developmental psychology and going into the outer reaches of development, but taking that in that direction. So how do we find that higher love? That Aurobindo talked about, that Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who was very familiar with Aurobindo. For those, I think of one person I can see here who might know what I'm talking about, that where Chardin talked about where he got in trouble with the Catholic Church, going with agape and omega point, going to that higher Christ consciousness, agape love, from the erotic, from the sexual, from the just la familia, going beyond to that higher level love that is talked about by Jenny Wade and Jamie's loose references to tantric, Tibetan, Vajrayana, tantric yoga. That's the subject, but I don't know how to formulate a simple question to it.
Let me see if I can try. So I'm on that same page, Tom, page 213. Yep. For those who have their book here. One of the things that Jamie mentions that Jenny was seeking out were naive practitioners. So these might be folks that stumbled into a transcendent experience without, seeking out some explicitly tantric practice, right, or framing. So again, in breakout rooms, it's not recorded. So this is our opportunity to be a little more, if we feel comfortable being vulnerable, this would be the time and place to do it. So why don't we start with that? Maybe if there's been an experience, however appropriate as we need to get, that we share it just in this small group time, and then we can maybe go ahead.
I'm going to leave it up to others to ask me about that, because it goes into, a lot of people are just uncomfortable with that. So I'm going to be careful about where I go. But, you know, I want to take it in a direction between, you know, sex, drugs, rock and roll, although I very much started there. But that's not where I have ended.
So how about we'll form a question somewhere in the realm of, have you ever had a sexual experience that either bumped up into or even fully reached some sort of transcendent state? How about something like that?
That's it. That's it. You did a perfect job of formulating a question.
Well, you teed me up well, Tom. So all right, it's 10:17, so we'll take 13 to 15 minutes or so together. We'll be in groups of 4, and I will let the spirit of the Zoom, you know, decide where we get to go. So get ready. Get ready to be invited into your room.
Warp,
Here we go.
Warp 9.
All right, we are back. We had an awesome session in group 2, I think is what our group was. We chose group number 2 because that was the one that fit with Coptic philia. Just kidding. But one of the things we ended with was a curiosity around where things went with group number 1. So is it anyone from group 1?
Recite.
I don't know what you're talking about, Tom.
Alice in Wonderland. She's talking to the caterpillar.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
It turns into a butterfly. There you go.
Tom, you're like 10 steps ahead of me. Just you gotta ease me into this. All right. Somebody from group 1, can you recite?
I vote for David.
All right. David, if you weren't awake before, we're hoping you are now.
So, well, we had a it seems like quite a variety of experience in our room. My my biggest takeaway is that is really that there's two types of sex. I mean, maybe it's on a spectrum, but that a lot of sex is cannot, it fulfills an animal desire and whatnot, and then there's a sex that's really connecting and divine. And I mean, I don't think that's necessarily how everyone in our room would say it, but again, I get to talk, so that's what I'm saying. I that just rings so true for me. Like I sex is great. I love pretty much all sex, but I've had the experience of divine connection in sex, and it was so much more than just sex. It was amazing. And I feel like that really wasn't covered in the book very well. But Clint talked about an interview last week, and I found it and posted it to Mighty Networks if anyone's interested, where Jamie and his wife do talk about that.
I remember seeing that come up, and I'm sad for my past self that I didn't click on it, but I'm excited for my future self because that's what I'm gonna be listening to this afternoon. So thank you, Clint and David, for sharing that. Did anyone else on the call happen to click in on that since it, Mari?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did. I thought it was really interesting. I would say most sex for me has not been good, but where it has been, there has been a level of emotional and intellectual connection. And yeah, I thought that interview was fantastic. The having a practice outside of a desire to fill a purpose other than, you know, an animal purpose. So yeah, it's cool.
That was really well said. A practice outside of a desire. I don't know if that's how they said it, but I really like the way you just said that.
I agree.
David, when you mentioned that sort of like there's two kinds of sex, or there's like a spectrum, what I started to see in my mind was actually that sort of like that middle ground. Like, so maybe if there's on one side of the spectrum, it's what, so this is sex between two people. Okay, those are our parameters. There's the person seeking their desires, trying to get what they want out of it. And instead of the other end of the spectrum being that divine thing, like that's more the middle. And then there's this other end of the spectrum to where you're so focused on your partner, or even if partner is not the right word, like it could be the other person, even in a negative way, to where you're just so focused on them that you cannot be a part of that divine middle. That's what sort of was visualized in my mind as you were describing sort of the two poles, that the divine part really is sort of in the middle, the yin and the yang kind of. There's a part where you really are pursuing your desires, or being aware of your desires and being aware of your partner's desires, and that's the sweet spot.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because I initially was kind of characterizing it in my head as the divine end being more of the completely selfless, but as I consider it now, the divine experiences I've had have been where I was, I mean, I don't know, I was being way less selfish and definitely selfless in a way, but also being open, being so not wanting to get, but open to the experience in a very like sponge kind of way, just like soaking it in, right? So I'm giving, I'm actively giving, but I'm also receiving back, but it's not a taking receiving, it's just an open receiving. It's a feeling back the reflection, and that, yeah, that's just like ultimate. I don't even know, you know, it's hard to find words to even describe it.
Mari had a good comparison in our group, if she wanted to share, about a wedding that she went to.
Sure. I went to a wedding that was set up for this amazing tripping experience. I took ecstasy and LSD and then floated around these different stations that were set up. But I didn't know really anybody at the wedding except my brother. I didn't even know my sister-in-law, really, even though I was a bridesmaid. And it was amazing. But I've had sexual experiences where that the emotional connection, like it said in the book that some people thought it was, you know, the experience, the transcendent experience was better than the psilocybin or whatever. And I would put some sexual experiences in that category as better than this. This peak experience of this wedding, which was, incredible. And yeah, I think the connection really, the emotional connection, because partly too, like you're saying like selfless and selfish, or, you know, whatever it is, and then divine in the middle, but both of those kind of, there's kind of like an understanding that it involves orgasm, or that there's going to be some kind of like need or desire met, something like that, where to me the divine experience can include not having an orgasm, or, you know, so.
And there it is. There's the connection between your group and our group. And we wondered, and when we were finishing, we were like, I wonder where their group is going and how it intersects with what we talked about. And Tom had brought up his journey towards this that involved martial arts, involved different partners, and then eventually it involved a lack of actual copulation. And Tom will clarify all this, but one of the things I remembered from it was that there was this state that begins before the orgasm, and maybe that's not even the right way to describe it, because there is no orgasm. It's the pre-orgasmic state for the orgasm that never comes. And so you're in that sort of afterglow state for an extended period of time, and that there is no end, or maybe there is an ending. At some point you fall asleep,
Well,
8 hours later or something, I don't know, but
the weekend is over. And this is
when
from the
the
male
weekend is over.
perspective.
Yeah.
This is from the male perspective, of course, maintaining that non-ejaculatory state.
Well, and so what I'm wondering is, like, what we're describing, or what's described in the book even as that post-orgasmic state, maybe it's mischaracterized as really this like there is a threshold that gets crossed at some point, right? There's some sort of buildup, and then you enter that state pre-orgasm. And if you can maintain that and not even have an orgasm, if that's the state that we're trying to sort of get to, then calling it the post-orgasmic state. At least, so again, we're mixing our terms here. We're talking about male orgasm in our case, and in Jamie's.
It applies to the female too, but they're going to, and there is a female ejaculation. Probably most men hardly ever, but yeah. So, but it's still, I tend to go to a place that most people are going to roll their eyes and either shut me down or, if you're familiar with David Data in the integral circles, for those of you who are integrally informed, and what he was talking about, I had a friend who lives very much in the green meme sort of world, who practiced that with his wife. Essentially the same thing I was, although David Data takes a more Hindic, tantric, or Tibetan spin on that. But yeah, but it's very advanced, and he's still there with his wife. But there's a post where you can get into that space, that shun, it's minding the gaps. If you're meditated and your meditation teacher, you do concentration meditation, you do mindfulness, and I got from Jack Cornfield was mind the gaps. And the gap that most men ignore is that gap where they're just about to go. And it's, there was before, and that's how the literature describes it, physiological, and then climax, and there's a female variation of that, but it's that as the balloon's about to pop, so to speak, that gets ignored. There's pre that, there's post that, there's afterglow. Let's have the cigarette and fall asleep, or whatever you do. No, they ignore the most. That's the same with meditation. That which observes the rising and falling, the gaps of transitions, and that's what will get you to the ultimate Turiya Tita, the fourth placing that is present in all states. Well, it's there at that point. And for us guys, we got to pay attention to that. And we got to get her there. You get her there first. If she gets there in a bigger way, she will take you there. The Dakini is the most important element to that self-transcendence, as Jamie refers to here with that Tibetan yogini, who was a goddess for Vajrayana, for that particular, but I tend to go out there, so I'll be quiet, because I'll go into crazy land and you won't appreciate it.
Kimberly, I'll bring us back.
Well, I don't know if I'll bring us back. As Tom was talking about that, I don't know if I can explain this very well, but what came to my mind was that in Buddhism, the whole idea is to stop grasping and wanting more, and as I heard Tom speaking, what came to my mind was you let go of grasping and you just stay in that place. And if you don't go for the orgasm, you don't grasp for that orgasm, you stay and you just relax and let go. Does that make sense?
Let go of the shovel? Mari's animated here. Why don't Mari, is this?
Yes, Kimberly, what you said. That's it, especially for us men. We want that. It's the grasping. And I want all the good shit. I want all the yumminess I can get from a woman, but I don't want any of that crazy shit, the baby in the stroller and the responsibility. I just want the good stuff, desire and aversion.
And then if you grasp, you lose it all.
Right. Dukkha, having your, the milk, having your milk and drinking it too, it never sours. No, What one interpretation of dukkha in the Buddhist dukkha is, or the wheel that's stuck. You're stuck there, and it's just nothing but misery for men and women and their relationships, life in general. So that's it. It's very Zen Taoist. That's it. What she said. Again, the Dakini states it in a way that is graspable. The Daka is just a fool rambling on.
I would, and I think there's a Buddhist tendency, just like there's in Christianity, to kind of get focused on that. I would say the more shadow aspect of not grasping. So you get into this point, like this has actually happened to me. I'm like, I'm not going to grasp. I'm not going to get carried away. And so I lose that experience as well. I was studying yesterday this guy named Thomas Hubel, who talks about collective trauma. And one thing that I liked about what he said, which relates to the Julie and Jamie video, is that he talks about filling something with space. We don't fill things with enough space. And the sense I got with Julie and Jamie's experience is that when they have this dedicated experience to their connection, it sounds like it's much more, it is infused with some of that tantric precipice, what you guys are talking about, the plateau, but it's also just to kind of like, let's just see what rises up. And it can be trauma. I mean, it can definitely be trauma. And so the trauma meets the tension that is within that plateau. And it's not resisted, it's not shamed. It has a purity to it, or a sacredness to it. And that's, but we've got to allow for that. It's just like but also like not get into this, like, I'm not going to grasp like I have, but just really say, okay, let's just really seriously be dedicated to allowing here in this space, in this practice. I have a real interesting thing that happened that came to me as I was a yoga teacher, was that I would tell people, because some people just like don't feel like coming to class sometimes, and I realized that. And I said, if you don't feel like coming to class, please come to class. But here's the deal I'll make with you. You don't have to pay. And I said, you can come to the class, and what I want you to do is I want you to hold space for your yoga practice. Just sit there. I mean, and if you end up wanting to get involved, you don't have to like change and pay me at that point. But I want you to, it's so important that you just hold that space for the yoga, but don't feel obligated to do anything within that space. And I think that's what I get the sense with Julie and Jamie as far as their practice goes. They're holding space for connection, for losing themselves, as Mari brought up in another thing in our group, and that vulnerability.
Muga ichinen, seishio chuetsu.
Yeah, what he said.
Yeah, that needs explanation. That state he's talking about, because I started with the martial arts. And Zen in the martial arts in Chan, and these are Japanese martial arts terms I drew from the Book of Five Rings, is Zen Mu, which is Wu, which is emptiness. And there's Muga, Mushin, Munin. Muga is no self, Mushin, Munin, no mind, no thought. And that's a state you attain in the martial arts in combat with the opponent. And you want rest in emptiness. And in martial art, I've attained, this is where I started getting these transcendent states first in combat in martial arts, sparring with black belts. And you wanted to attain the state of Muga Ichinen, which was no self, one thought. You're focused on just this. The self, I am this and that, is gone. And then Seishio Chuetsu is going beyond all states of living and dying. I'm this, this is this, I, thou disappear, you're in the hyphen, and something happens. Well, applying that in combat, because I sparred with a black belt, I was a brown belt, but I was a black belt capacity. Well, I started applying that in my relationship with the woman, because it's the same yoga, and attaining that state of no self, no thought, no mind, no expectations, mood, emptiness. The Japanese versions of what Kimberly was talking about with Buddhist, it's Buddhist, it's Taoist, where you're just there with this I thou, with this my bread making poem that I think Mari B is the only one that read, has to do with this. In combat, in love making, same game. Just drop, be with, interact in the way you are, love making or combat. And now I do it dancing, or with music with my dance partner. I sing with her and we do music, we dance. I do that with music with guys. So it's the same thing, that you don't need to plug in. I call it Bluetooth love. I don't need to plug in. I just need to get in proximity and get in the vibe with this other. You don't need your pecker to find joy in life. My advice to the guys, the women get it.
Sharif, what's coming up for you?
As I told in the group, I have not much experience, but as Clint was saying, like, give us space. And also David was telling the two sides. I don't know, I always try to please someone who's with me, looking what she expects and what she would like, trying to be aware of that and not rushing, not pushing. I mean, not physical, but mental pushing. So in that way, sex doesn't really happen much often, but when it happens, both people enjoy it, and I'm not good at explaining.
No, you are. Or at least you are to me. I'm tracking all sorts of things with what you're saying right there. You brought up a very specific situation for me to where, and this goes back to even what was coming up when David was describing the two polarities of this union. I had a relationship where I was just way too much focused on giving. It was so much like, I'm gonna give, I'm gonna give, I'm gonna give, and I'm gonna make sure that it is good enough every time. And, you know, ladies first and the whole kind of thing. And then we recognized this at one point and turned the tables, if you will. And it was my time to receive. And it was a struggle. I don't want to get too graphic, but it was like almost impossible because we had built up such a imbalanced sort of give take dynamic that when it was reversed, it was like all the magic that we thought was there wasn't there. And the relationship ultimately ended not that long after that, not because of that, but it was maybe one of the first recognitions of a lack of balance, whatever that divine middle might be. And I can say that I've learned from that to where I recognize the middle now, and that's what we're both like sort of looking for, and we adjust.
That's what I was talking about, what Sharice's talking about, what you're talking about, Zach. Young men learning to give. It's hard, and that's the start. So you got to reverse the current, and then you find the balance.
Mine was the opposite.
Yeah,
mine
know.
Was the opposite. It was weird. It was like,
yep.
Yeah, it was.
I know.
Give. Yeah.
But it's finding that balance. But usually we have trouble giving. We're takers. That's the default position for most of us men, and learning to give, and then that's hard. And sometimes the women don't know how to relate to that because they're so used to the normal balance. That's in dance, it's lead follow. men tend to lead, women tend to want to follow, but that's not always the case. But learning to follow. So it's like reversing the current for a while, what's not natural for you, and then learning and then finding a balance, not either or, it's a both and ultimately, but because I'm used to being, I get what I want, baby, go fetch me a beer and make me a sandwich while I smoke a cigarette. And then, do the other one, baby, I'll wait. Oh, baby, can I fetch you a beer, a wine? And well, you go ahead, light up the cigarette. I'll clean that. No. So it's finding the balance between the two and staying on the razor's edge for a longer period of time, not just for 20 minutes. Oh, not just for an hour. Oh, but for the whole weekend. And then, of course, you got to go to the work week, and then, and then the next weekend, it's Friday, it's Saturday, it's Sunday, and then, the work week starts. You go your way, I go my way. No, taking that further and further, what is just a moment that you can hardly notice, hardly remember, but you always want to return to, and extending that out and living there. That's nirvana. That is the Pure Land.
Hey, Tom, yeah.
Far up.
Tom, I don't know if men are like that anymore. I mean, I think definitely older men, but the conversations I'm having with younger men is that they don't know when to show up. And so there is more kind of a pleaser type of mentality.
You may have a point there, because I'm working class, I'm a baby boomer, I'm old school, a church guy. So I'm in a whole nother world than that. I do notice that around here. I live in a foreign world here in Olympia. So, but that's not my logger, shake rat, sawmill worker, macho guy world that I grew up in and lived as a young adult.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we are actually at the top of the hour now, and I'll open it up for anybody who's got something that's really alive right now they might be able to close us with, and then we have a new. I think is this our last chapter in hedonic engineering, or is there one more? Chapter 11, an immodest proposal.
Yeah, it's still, there's more hedonic engineering stuff in there.
Okay. Yep. So this must be, and this is actually a pretty. Yep. So this is the last one of the hedonic engineering chapter 2. Section 2 of the book here. So we can use it as we'll use the content of chapter 11 for our conversation, and if we need to go back to anything else that maybe we touched on individually, and maybe even look at integrating it. Had some things come up connecting sex and music that I thought might be fun to explore together, and maybe others with sacraments and whatnot. So before we break, is there anything that's really alive that you feel needs to be spoken through you right now?
I just want to say a quick thing. I watched Lollapalooza on Hulu last night, just tapped in, and it was all about that, that beat music. And it was so trippy, and I had it full volume in my room, and it was like, oh, I get it. So I just wanted to offer that. It was pretty cool.
Really? Do you remember the name of the artist?
It's the DJ from Netherlands, Oliver Helden. I don't remember if I got the last name right. Helgen.
Cool. Well, if you find a link, if you want to share it in our chat, that might be cool.
I don't know if they have. It was live. It wasn't recorded or a recording. So if they have, I can at least put his name out there. He's supposed to be one of the best DJs for this kind of electronic music and getting that beat going. So yeah, I'll do some little research.
All right. So next week we'll be kind of wrapping all these things up, integrating them. So if something comes up in that sort of category, let's bring it all together, and then we'll switch to the ethical cult building the week after that. So, all right, and I will try even harder to get the recordings up there, but hopefully we're all enjoying the live synchronous aspect of our connection here. So I appreciate you all and the conversations we keep getting up to. So thanks for bringing yourself to this, and enjoy the week. We'll see you next time.
Adios.
You want to unmute? Say bye.
I'm waiting.
Adios.
I
Bye,
wait for it.
everyone.
Good to see you.
Bye-bye.